Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirala Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Daled on Rosh Hashana, and the topic of the Sicha is that in this year, Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos. And there are four parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number one, present that there's something special in such a kvius when Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos that relates to the very essence of Rosh Hashana. Number two, present the central idea of Rosh Hashana and how it's connected to the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shefer. Number three, explain how in this kvius, this central point of Rosh Hashana is especially emphasized. And number four, present the hira from this. The second day of Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah is different than the second day of Yom Tov by all other Yomim Tovim like Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos, and it's different in its connection to the first day of Yom Tov and also to the whole idea of the Yom Tov itself. And this idea that the second day of Rosh Hashanah has a different type of connection to the first day and to the whole idea of Rosh Hashanah itself is also understood in Halacha L'Maisa, in which Halacha L'Maisa all Yidden are equal. Like we find that something which is noilad on the first day of Rosh Hashanah is also aser on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So, for example, an egg which is noilad on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's not only aser on the first day, it's also aser on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which is not so by all other Yomim Tevim. Where there we say that if an egg is noilad on the first day of the Yom Tov, it's also on that day, but it's mutter on the next day. And the reason is because of a Mamanashach, who say the whole idea of the second day of Yom Tov is because of a suffix. They didn't know originally which is the real day. So we say Mamanashach. No matter how you look at it, the person should be able to use it on the second day of Yom Tov. Because if the first day is the real day of Yom Tov, that means the next day is not Yom Tov, it's after Yom Tov, it's Chol Hamoed. So a person could use it because it's not Yom Tov, it's not Neilad on Yom Tov. And if we say that the first day is not Yom Tov and the second day is the real day of Yom Tov, then it wasn't Neilad on Yom Tov, it was Neilad on the first day, which wasn't Yom Tov. However, by Rosh Hashanah, if the egg is Neilad on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's also both on the first day and on the second day. So we see this idea of a greater connection between the second day of the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah to the first day than the second day of all other Yomim Tevim. And the reason for this difference in halacha is because the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are like one long day. And this idea that there's a special connection between the second day of Rosh Hashanah to the first day that's found in Rosh Hashanah and not in other Yomim Tevim is especially according to Pnimis HaTorah. Because in Likutei Torah it explains about the pasuk of Yechayenu miYomayim that Yomayim are the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And the reason it refers to it as Yomayim is because Rosh Hashanah is always 2 days, even when they were Mekadesh al Piyah Re'iyah, where the other Yom Tevim all had 1 day, if they were close enough to Yerushalayim. Even then, Rosh Hashanah was very often 2 days, so that's why Yomayim refers to Rosh Hashanah. And as it's explained over there in Likutei Torah, that on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, there's Aliyas HaElamus. On the first day, it's the Pnimius of the Elamus, and on the second day, it's the Chitzanius. So it's understood from the teaching over there in Likutei Torah that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are one thing. So we see this connection of the second day to the first day. They're both one thing, Aliyas HaElamus, and it's just that in Aliyas HaElamus there are 2 parts. There's the Pnimius and there's the Chitzanius. So what we're essentially saying over here is that we find a special connection between the second day of Rosh Hashanah to the first day of Rosh Hashanah and to the whole idea of Rosh Hashanah that we don't find in the second day of other Yomim Tevim. And this is found both in Halacha L'Maisa, in which all Yidden are equal, and also and especially according to Pnimis HaTorah, where we see that the idea of Aliyas HaElamus that it talks about in Likutei Torah, it explains that that is the idea of both the first and second day of Rosh Hashanah. Now we're going to move on to the main point of the Sikha that's going to be discussed and explained throughout the Sikha, and that is that the connection of the second day of Rosh Hashanah to the first day of Rosh Hashanah and to the whole idea of Rosh Hashanah. So this idea is noticed and expressed in a greater way in a year like ours when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos. And so this is going to be the basis of the whole Sikha to explain one of the central ideas of Rosh Hashanah and how it's expressed and emphasized more in a year when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos. So now we're going to move into a side discussion and speak about one of the central points of Rosh Hashanah. And then after we completely discuss it, we'll bring it back and show how in a Kvius of when Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos, this idea is especially emphasized. So in the Tefillah of Rosh Hashana, we say Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maasecha. Now, since we say Maasecha in the plural, so it's understood that Zeh Hayom of Rosh Hashana is not just a Tchilah to the specific creation of man, because we say Maasecha plural. So it's not just the tchila to the specific creation of man who was created on Rosh Hashana, but rather it's also the tchila of everything that Hashem created, also what was created on the first 5 days of creation before the creation of man. Meaning, so what we're saying over here is, because what's the idea of Rosh Hashana? The idea of Rosh Hashana is the hischatshus, that on Rosh Hashana, Hashem, so to speak, loses interest in the worlds, and He's just creating them, so to speak, in a physical way, but the interest is not there. And on Rosh Hashana, there's a hischatshus, that Hashem gets the interest again in the world. So that interest, that the schachos of the creation on Rosh Hashanah, is not just something that's special for man alone, because we said it's tchilas maasecha of everything, but rather it includes all the worlds, everything that was created in all 6 days of creation, in our world and in all of the worlds, all of the Ruchni Yizdikar worlds as well. So this means that this schachos of the creation that's on Rosh Hashanah is not just something that's special for man alone, but rather it includes all the worlds and all of Ishtalshlus. And nevertheless, the tzchachos of all the worlds is on the day of the creation of man. Now we're going to move on to explain why it is that Rosh Hashanah, Zeh Hayom of Rosh Hashanah, is Tchilas Maasecha, is the Schachos of Maasecha, of everything in the world and all of Ishtalshlus, even though only man was created on the 6th day. So the reason for this is because the purpose of all the Ishtalshlus, all the worlds, all the Tzimtzumim, all the Masachim, all the Parsais, etc., the purpose of everything is in order to create this world, Olam Haza Tachten. And Hashem wanted to create this world because Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'Yizbarach Dira B'Tachtenim. The purpose of everything is this world because Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'Yizbarach Dira B'Tachtenim. So that's the purpose of everything, is this world. Now, in this idea of Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'Yizbarach Dira B'Tachtenim, there are 2 aspects in it. Number 1 is what we don't know, and that is why Hashem wants that His Dira should be B'Tachtenim. And when we say we don't know, what that means is because there's no reason for this, and it's above reason, and it's only because that's what He was nisava. So it's essentially something that comes from the essence of Hashem. It's unknowable. It's not that there's a reason and we don't know it. It comes from the essence of Hashem, which transcends reason. And then there is what we do know, and that is what Hashem was nisava. What was He nisava for? And that is Liyis Le'Yizbarach Dir B'Tachtenim. Now, before we continue with the explanation for why it is, how does this answer, why is Rosh Hashanah, Tchilas Maasecha of everything, we're going to go into a side discussion, which is, according to this, there's a question. However, if this is the case, that the purpose of everything is Olam Haza Tachtan, because Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'Yizbarach Dira B'Tachtenim, then it's not understood. What's the purpose of the creation of the Olam Yisrael? Why did Hashem create all these higher Ruchni Yizdikar worlds? Because Hashem is able to just create the Nevrayim Tachtenim, and they all become a Dir Le'Yizbarach. If the point is Dir Le'Yizbarach B'Tachtenim, so all that's needed to be created is Olam Haza Tachten. So why did Hashem create all the Olam Yisrael? And the answer is, what Hashem wants is not just that His Dira should be B'Tachtenim, but rather also that the Nevrayim Tachtenim should make a Dir Le'Yizbarach. It's not just that Hashem wants a Dir Le'Yizbarach B'Tachtenim. He also wants that this Dir Le'Yizbarach should be made by the Tachtenim themselves, meaning specifically by their Avodah and their Yegiyah. And this, that the Dir Le'Yizbarach B'Tachtenim should be made by the Tachtenim, is only possible if the Nevrayim Tachtenim are created in such a way that there's first the whole of Ishtalshlus. As this idea is explained in Chassidus, that it's only if there is first the entirety of Ishtalshlus that it's possible for the Nevrayim Tachtenim to be the ones who make the Dir Le'Yizbarach. And the short idea is that what the Ishtalshlus causes is that there's a connection between a person and all the higher worlds, because one comes from the next, and so that allows the Nivra, the Tachten, to have a connection to Ruchnius, and through that be able to make the Dir B'Tachtenim. And so that's why all of Ishtalshalos was created, all the higher worlds, even though the whole purpose of creation, the whole Nisava is for a dir b'tachtenim, because Hashem doesn't just want that the dir should be b'tachtenim, which then he could do it on his own, but he wants that the tachtenim should make the dira. And in order for the tachtenim to be able to do that, that's only if they were created in a way that there's all of Ishtalshalos beforehand. Now we can explain what we were talking about before, that Rosh Hashana is Zehayim Tchilas Maasecha of everything. So with this it's understood why Rosh Hashana is Tchilas Maasecha in the plural. It's Tchilas Maasecha of everything. That not only is the creation of man Mischadish on Rosh Hashana, who man was created on Rosh Hashana, but rather it's also the creation of everything else as well. Everything else is also Mischadish, even what wasn't created on the day of Rosh Hashanah, because the main purpose of the creation of everything is that a person, through their avodah, with and through the creation, should make a dir le'yizbarach b'tachtenim. That's the purpose of everything, that a person should be able to make in everything that's here a dir b'tachtenim, and for that everything had to be created. The things where the person is making the dira, and the things, all of ishtalshlos that give a person the ability to make the dira, and therefore they are also mischadish when man is mischadish, because man is the purpose of their creation. Now we're going to move on and explain a point about all of this, and that is that even though also at the beginning of their creation, of all of the shtalshlus and all the things that were created in the first 5 days, the whole purpose of their creation, even then, was for avodas Adam, and nevertheless they weren't created when man was created, but rather they were created before him. So if now we say it has to be on the same day, why wasn't it also like that at the beginning of creation? So that's because when they were originally created, so they were still a preparation for the ultimate purpose of the creation of man. When they were created, man was not yet created, and he didn't yet in any way serve the purpose of his creation. So there was no man there yet, and the purpose wasn't there yet. So they were being created as a preparation for man, meaning they were created then so that man should afterwards find everything prepared for his avodah. But this is not so by the eschachos of creation afterwards, each and every year, and especially after Matan Torah, when we are able to fulfill the purpose of creation in a much greater way. So that's when man is already doing avodah. And with doing avodah, then man is already in actuality their whole purpose. It's not just that man will be created in the future and start fulfilling the purpose. Man already in actuality is being the purpose. And so therefore also their ischachus depends on what they were created for. So beforehand man wasn't around yet, so they were being created as a preparation for man. But once man is already created and doing his avodah, so then their ischachus, that their whole being depends on a person, on man, so their ischachus is on the same day of the ischachus of a person. Now we're going to take this central idea of Rosh Hashana, that it's the ischachus of all of the shtalshlos and all of creation, and connect it to another central point of Rosh Hashana. So since on Rosh Hashana it's the ischachus of all the elamis, and it's in such a way that their purpose of La'aseh Yisbarach Dir B'tachtenim is emphasized, because that's the reason why it's the ischachus of all the elamis, because the purpose of all the elamis is La'aseh Yisbarach Dir B'tachtenim, through the avodas Adam. So that's why Zahayim of Rosh Hashana is Tchilas Masach of everything. So we must say that also in the mitzvahs Hayim of Rosh Hashana, which the mitzvahs Hayim is the avodas Adam of this day, and it's what causes the ischachus of all the elamis. So we must say that also in the mitzvahs Hayim of Rosh Hashana, this idea of Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Leis Baruch Dir B'tachtenim is expressed. It's also expressed in the mitzvahs Hayim. So the explanation for this, how the idea of Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Leis Baruch Dir B'tachtenim is expressed in the mitzvahs Hayim, is going to be through presenting a teaching which will lead us into a question, and we're going to answer this question, and in the answer we'll see how the idea of Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Leis Baruch Dir B'tachtenim is expressed in the mitzvahs Hayim of Rosh Hashana. So the explanation is, Chazal say that mitzvah sayim is b'shofer. And the Rambam says, Af al pi shetkiyah shefer b'Rosh Hashana gzeres hakasuv, that even though the mitzvah of tkiyah shefer Rosh Hashana is a gzeres hakasuv, besides for the gzeres hakasuv, remez yesh bay, there's also a remez in it. Kaleimar uri yishenim v'chulu. And the remez, the message in it is, besides being a gzeres hakasuv, the remez, the message that's in it, is that a person has to wake up from their sleep and from not serving Hashem. Now this leads into a question. The chiddush of the Rambam here in Hilchos Tshuva, what's the Rambam coming to tell us over here? This is taught in Hilchos Tshuva, is the part that he says, Tkiyah Shefer b'Rosh Hashana remez yesh bay. He wants to talk about the remez in Tkiyah Shefer. He wants to talk about the awakening to do tshuva that's found in Tkiyah Shefer. And so the question is, why does he first say here in Hilchos Tshuva? So this has to be related to Hilchos Tshuva. The part that Tkiyah Shefer b'Rosh Hashana gzeres hakasuv. Why does he have to mention Tkiyah Shefer b'Rosh Hashana gzeres hakasuv? He could just say that there is a remez in Tkiyah Shefer. The fact that it's a gzeres hakasuv shouldn't be relevant to what he's teaching us here. In other words, even if you say that Tkiyah Shefer isn't a gzeres hakasuv, but rather has a reason, let's say there was a reason for Tkiyah Shefer, like some opinions say, we can still say it has a remez. So having a remez and it being a gzeres hakasuv, they're not in any way inherently connected. It could be a remez to Tkiyah Shefer regardless of whether Tkiyah Shefer is a gzeres hakasuv or there's a reason for it. So why does the Rambam over here mention the part of Tkiyah Shefer that it is a gzeres hakasuv? How is that relevant over here to the discussion in Hilchos Tshuva? The only part that seems to be relevant is the remez in Tkiyah Shefer, which is ur yishenim, that a person should wake up from their sleep and do tshuva. In order to answer this question, we must say that all of this, what the Rambam says, is the chiddush of the Rambam. That in Tkiyah Shefer, there are two things. That's what the Rambam's teaching us here. He's not coming just to say remez yesh by the idea of tshuva. He's also teaching us that Tkiyah Shefer is a gzeres hakasuv. He's coming to teach us the gzeres hakasuv and the remez, which is avodas tshuva. What's the explanation for this? It says in the Medrash on the pasuk of Echkama v'hi rechaykim mimeni that Shlomo Melech was saying this about the mitzvah of paraduma. Echkama, I try to understand it, v'hi rechaykim mimeni, but it's far from me. So it says that Shlomo didn't grasp with his chachma the reason for paraduma, and the Medrash says that Hashem only revealed the reason of paraduma to Moshe Rabbeinu. Meaning, what does this? Is the Medrash saying over here that even though paraduma is, like the pasuk says, zois chukas atera, which means that it's higher than reason, nevertheless it's not inherently in its essence removed and higher than reason, and it's just that Shlomo didn't grasp it, because we see that Moshe Rabbeinu did grasp it, and this is what the Rambam means to say with Tkiyah Shefer b'Rosh Hashana gzeres hakasuv. He's telling us that it's incorrect to say that Tkiyah Shefer has a reason, and he doesn't teach it because it can't be taught for some reason. But rather, what the Rambam is telling us over here is that inherently in its essence, Tkiyah Shefer is a gzeres hakasuv, which is higher than reason. And the reason for this is because Tkiyah Shefer is on a very high level that is beyond any connection to reason and understanding. The reason it has no reason, the reason it can't be grasped and understood, is because it's from a level that's higher than reason. And according to this, it comes out that the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shefer, which is a gzeres hakasuv, which, like we said, is higher than reason, is similar to the idea of Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'izbarach Dir B'Tachtenim, which is higher than reason. And as we're going to continue and explain how there's another aspect in Tkiyah Shefer, the remez, and how that connects to the other thing that we learned about the idea of Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'izbarach Dir B'Tachtenim, and that will show us how the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shefer is connected to this central idea of Rosh Hashana, that it's the schachos of all the elamis and of everything in the world, because it's the day of Brias HaAdam, and the whole purpose of everything is Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'izbarach Dir B'Tachtenim through our Avodah, and that's why the day of the creation of man is the day of the schachos of all of the elamis and of everything that was created in our world, including what was created in the first 5 days. Continuing with this idea that the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shefer is a gzeres hakasuv, which is above reason, and with that it's similar to the idea of Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'izbarach Dir B'Tachtenim, which is also above reason, and it just comes from the essence of Hashem. And nevertheless, we say about Tkiyah Shefer, remez yesh bay, k'leimer uri yishenim chulu. There's also a remez in it, which is the idea of avodas tshuva. That shofar relates to the general avodah of a person, which is divided into two categories. There has to be ur yeshenim chulu, is the sur meira, that a person has to stop doing averes, and there's the continuation over there, which says shipru ma'aseichem is the asay toiv. So there's the remez in Tkiyah Shofar, which is the general avodah of a person. A person has to do tshuva, and it includes in it the general avodah of sur meira and asay toiv. And therefore the Rambam includes both of them together. He says it's Exeres HaKosav and the Remez Yeshbai. This that Tkiyah Shofar is Exeres HaKosav and the Remez in it. Even though the essence of the idea of Tkiyah Shofar is above reason and comes from a level that's above reason, nevertheless we reach this level specifically through Avodas Ha'adam. That's the message over here. That it's through the Avodas Ha'adam that we get to this high level. And this fits with the idea, which we said is a central point of Rosh Hashana, of Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'Yizbarach Dir B'Tachtenim. The essence of Nis'ava, like we said, is something which is higher than reason. But the Dir that Hashem is Nis'ava for is caused and happens specifically through Avodas Ha'adam. It's not just in the Tachtenim, it's through the Avodah of the Tachtenim. And with this, it's understood why the mitzvah sayem of Rosh Hashana is shofar, because the idea of shofar fits with the purpose and intent of the creation of the Eilumis, which is mischadish on Rosh Hashana, which is that Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyis Le'Yizbarach Dir B'Tachtenim. The idea of Nis'ava and the mitzvah sayem of Rosh Hashana, of Tkiyah Shofar, both have in them the same message, the same idea, which is that they themselves are above reason, but the way to get to them is through the avodah of a person. Now we can come back to the original point in the Sikha, that the connection of the second day of Rosh Hashana to the first day of Rosh Hashana, and to the whole idea of Rosh Hashana is noticed and expressed in a greater way in a year like ours when Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos. Because when Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos, like this year, this aspect of Tkiyah Shofar, that the Ischachos comes through Avodas Ha'adam, is missing. Because even though Shabbos accomplishes and is mamshech everything of Tkiyah Shofar, and it's for this reason indeed that Shabbos accomplishes and is mamshach everything of Tkiyah Shofar, that we don't do Tkiyah Shofar when Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos, like it's explained in many Maimarim and Chassidus. But nevertheless, we're missing this fundamental point, that the Ischachos comes through Avodas Ha'adam. Because in such a year, it's being accomplished through the power of Shabbos, that's Mekacha v'Kayama on its own, without Tkiyah Shofar. And in such a year, this aspect of Tkiyah Shofar, that it's done through the Avodas Ha'adam, that the Ischachos comes through the Avodas Ha'adam, is only emphasized on the second day of Rosh Hashana. In addition, in such a year, when we don't blow shofar on the first day, even though everything is accomplished through Shabbos itself, nevertheless the physical sound of the shofar and everything that goes along with it is missing. And we only have it on the second day of Rosh Hashana. And this is the advantage in a year when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos like this year. Because the greatness of Avodas Ha'adam is emphasized even more than when Rosh Hashanah falls out on any other day of the week. The explanation is, in all those other years, when Rosh Hashanah falls out on a different day of the week, not on Shabbos, so the main Ischachos comes about through the Mitzvah Sayem, which is the Avodas Ha'adam of Tkiyah Shofar. Whereas when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, so then the Ischachos is accomplished without Avodas Ha'adam. And nevertheless, we say to a person, even though the Olamais were fully nischadish on their own through the very being of Shabbos itself, nevertheless, and after all of this, your Aveda in this area is needed. And when the second day comes, which will be Sunday, the second day of Rosh Hashanah, you have to blow shofar. So in such a year, the importance and the significance of Avodas Ha'adam is emphasized even more. Because in such a year it would seem that it's not necessary. Everything was already accomplished. And nevertheless, a person is told that even though everything was already accomplished, the Avodah of a person of Tkiyah Shofar is still necessary. And so this emphasizes and magnifies the importance and significance and the necessity of the Avodas Ha'adam. From here we have a Hira to each and every one, which is emphasized especially in the Kviyas of this year. The Chiyuv of Aveda isn't specifically when there's something missing that needs to be fixed, and through the person's Aveda one fixes and completes it. Rather, even when the matter is already fixed and complete through tzaddikim, and even through Hashem, tzaddikai shel olam, nevertheless, he still needs the Aveda of the Adam Atachtin, and so much so that without the Aveda of the person, the shlemus of the matter isn't a true shlemus. And even according to Pnimius HaTorah, that on the first day there's Aliyas Ha'in L'Mois in the Pnimius, and on the second day it's in the Chitzenius. And so it would seem that the first day is the more important day, even though both days are about Aliyas Ha'in L'Mois. But in the first day it's connected to the Pnimius, which is in the Shamas Yisrael, and the second day it's everything else, the Chitzenius. But in a Kviyas, when Rosh Hashana falls out on Shabbos, there is a greater emphasis on the importance of Avodas Ha'adam. On the first day, when everything is accomplished through Shabbos, so then it's not recognized and revealed in Olam Haza Gashmi, the idea of Tkiyah Shefer. There's no Birchas Shefer and no Shechianu. Whereas on the second day, when a person blows the Shefer, it makes a bracha, which means he's mamshech, the Kitshon of a mitzvah of Tzivanu, which that is the idea of the Tzafs of a Chibur. That's the mitzvah is Lashon Tzafs of a Chibur. And one doesn't need a new garment, but rather just says Shechianu v'kiyamanu v'giyanu l'zman hazeh. So it seems like the explanation over here is that on the second day, usually we could only say Shechianu with a new beged, which indicates that it's not as great of a day. But in such a year, we say Shechianu just on the blowing of the shofar itself, which that brings out the greatness of the Avodas Ha'adam, that even though it's a second day, which would seem to be in a way not as great as the first day, it's Aliyas Ha'elamis B'chitzenius, and you can only say Shechianu with a new beged. But in such a year, the Shechianu is said on the mitzvah of blowing shofar itself, which indicates the greatness of this day, which is connected, like we said, to the idea and the greatness and significance of Avodas Ha'adam.